I'm a 28-year-old female from South Carolina. This man, my mom's ex-boyfriend, has been an unwelcome intrusion in our lives for 30 years, and frankly, I have a feeling that it's not going to end anytime soon. Short of taking measures that are too extreme to even consider, my family and I don't seem to have any choice other than to put up with it. It's frustrating, because it feels as though we're under siege, waiting for a blow to fall that we know isn't going to come. Something has to give, though. We can't ignore it, because just when we think it's over, he pops back up. We run into him in town. Someone mentions his name, or an event will trigger a memory, and we're right back in that hopeless, frustrating feeling of powerlessness. I can't count every single step that's brought my family to this point. It would just take too long. But I can relate the major events that have happened. Even without every detail, this is still going to be pretty long. I guess I should start at the beginning. To make a very long story short, my mom met this guy in high school. We'll call him Rick. Rick and my mom dated for 4 years, starting at the end of their senior year. He was the son of a local politician, very good looking and athletic. I've talked to her at length about her time with him, and she's told me that while they were initially together, there wasn't anything that she saw that would indicate something was off about him. Slowly though, over the course of their relationship, he changed. He started telling her what she could wear, who she could talk to. He told her she couldn't smoke anymore, and that she had to get a new car because he couldn't be seen with her in the old truck she drove. That she needed to move out of her parents' house and marry him as soon as possible. He was also pushing hard for her to sleep with him. She didn't, and she's never been able to say, at least to me, why that was, other than a feeling that she had that she shouldn't. For the most part, my mom ignored the way he was trying to control her life. She didn't do any of the things he wanted her to do. She's stubborn and very no-nonsense, so it floors me that she put up with this crap for so long. But she didn't feel like she could do any better, and she thought that, given time, she could change him. Rick didn't change, at least not for the better. If anything, he got worse. Became verbally abusive. He told her that she was lucky a fat girl like her even had a boyfriend. He put her down every chance he got. One night Rick came to pick my mom up for a date, one of their last. When he saw my mom sitting with her parents ready to go, he looked her over, told her she looked like a hooker, and that if she wanted to be seen with him, she'd clean the makeup off her face and put on something else. My grandparents threw him out of the house. My mom didn't call him for a while after that. Eventually, she broke up with him. She'd found out that he was sleeping with a friend of hers among several other women. Over the course of the year, they were no longer together. Rick was constantly trying to get back with her. He'd call her at work and at home. He'd drive by where she was working her second job or follow her when she drove somewhere other than to work or home. He tried to get her friends to tell him where she was or to give her messages from him. He even had his mother stop her in the grocery store and plead with her to get back with him. She told my mom that even though she was from lower class trash, her son was devastated without my mom in his life. While this was happening, my mom met my dad, and when Rick found out about it, he seemed to back off a little. My dad's a big guy and comes from a rough family with a reputation for fighting. I guess that made him hesitant to keep up with his behavior. For at least a little while, anyway. That changed when my parents got married. Suddenly, the phone calls started up again. My mom would pick up and hear heavy breathing on the line. A man's voice that was clearly disguised would try to ask her questions about her marriage or say something lewd about her, or the intimate aspect of my parents' relationship. I say try because as soon as she heard the voice, she'd hang up, although she wasn't always quick enough. Back then, there were no stalker laws, and since there wasn't any kind of physical assault, there wasn't much the police could do. Not that they would have anyway. We're from a small town, population hardly more than 5,000, and the sheriff was real good friends with Rick's father. Suffice to say, the legal avenue was closed to my family. My grandmothers, who are both tough and crafty women, tired of the harassment of the children, got together at one point and cornered Rick's mom in town one afternoon. They told her point blank that if she couldn't get a handle on her son and his behavior, they were going to make sure the newspapers found out what else he'd been up to. For a while, the calls stopped. Then I and my sister were born, and all hell broke loose. Rumors started flying around town that Rick was actually our father, and that my mom had been having an affair with him. Pictures of my mom with us at the store, or somewhere in town, would turn up in the mailbox, along with letters stating how much we looked like Rick. Or even more creepily, they would say how much we looked like our mom, or how very attractive we were going to be when we grew up. When my mom showed that particular letter to my dad, he was livid. That night he climbed into his truck and drove to the dive bar where Rick and his friends were known to hang out. Rick wasn't there, but about 3 of his buddies were. My dad demanded that they tell him where Rick was, but they wouldn't. When my dad turned to get back in his truck, intending to keep looking for the bastard all night if he had to, the men ganged up on him. Like I said before, my dad's a big dude and he grew up fighting. He handed their asses to them, broke 2 noses, and the other one lost his front teeth. When it was over, he told them to let Rick know that he'd find him if anything else happened. Years went by very quietly. My sister and I grew. We worked, and we made a life as a close-knit family. But then our teenage years hit, and suddenly things started happening again. Rick had, by this point, started and failed several businesses, got married twice, and had children of his own. With mouths to feed, he'd taken a job as a manager at the local grocery store. I was at driving age by this point, and it wasn't uncommon for my mom to send my sister and I to the store while she worked. We always enjoyed this, because it gave us the chance to play our too loud music, and to talk out of our mom's earshot about things she really wouldn't have wanted to hear. Typical teen girls. The first time we went in, and Rick was working there, he saw us and easily recognized us. I look more like my mom than my sister does, pretty much a carbon copy, whereas she's a spitting image of my dad, plus a small town. It wasn't hard for him to figure out who we were, and when he did, he followed us through the whole store. Every time we turned down an aisle, he'd be there, with the creepiest smile on his face. Looking back, I know that he was actually leering at us, but at the time I had no idea. I didn't know who he was either. We were practically babies when the pictures had been put in our mailbox as children. It was a topic, that our parents had rightfully not talked about in front of us. It wasn't until we were in our late teens before we were told the whole truth. Rick stopped us at the end of every aisle and would ask us questions about our mom. He asked us if we knew our mom's birthday, if we liked the same things she did, if we liked her dad. He told us how pretty we looked and how much we resembled her. We brushed off most of it. We were used to being recognized by people in town that knew our parents and grandparents. Most of the time they'd just say, "I know your mom," and never introduce themselves beyond that. So it didn't strike us as weird. It was the shower of compliments about our looks and our figures that made us uncomfortable. We rushed through the store as fast as we could to get away from him and back home. We didn't say anything to our parents. Both of them were overprotective and we didn't want to stir up trouble. Stupid idea, I know. Boy, do I know. Because this became a weekly ritual for almost a year. Every week, we sent to the store for the groceries, and Rick would be there, following us around. No one said anything, even though the cashiers would look at him funny as he stood in the checkout line with us, staring at us and talking non-stop. It got to the point that we would be in tears when we got outside again. But there wasn't a word said. Maybe the other people working in the store thought they'd get punished. Maybe they were afraid of him. I don't know. But when we finally did tell our parents, they were furious. Not so much with us, but over what had happened to us. We stopped going to that store and started shopping at the Walmart in the next town over. My granddad met with the store owner and Rick lost his job. Again, things were quiet for a few years. Occasionally we'd see him in town, and when we did, we avoided him as best we could. Sometimes he'd sneak up on us and try to talk to us. Raised in the southern tradition of manners, we just couldn't ignore him without feeling like we were committing a sin, so we made it as brief as possible. The compliments still came, weird and entirely unwelcome. But neither of us knew how to handle them, other than to say, "Thank you," and leave quickly. Time went on, and we went to college pretty far off, where there wasn't any chance of running into him. But he was still a presence. When Facebook came out, he was there, trying to friend us, sending us messages asking how our mom was doing, and how we liked school. We both blocked him. But he somehow tracked down our email addresses. It wouldn't have been hard for him to get them. He just had to ask the right people, and we'd never thought about having to guard that information. Both of us got bombarded with emails from Rick asking the same questions and talking about how much he looked forward to seeing us at home again. The worst one was a message he sent me, asking me to let my mom know that all she had to do was tell him she was leaving my dad and he'd divorce his current wife, leave his kids, and marry her, and that he would be the dad my sister and I needed in our lives. I blocked him immediately and called my sister to let her know so she could be on the lookout. My mom doesn't have an email address, so he couldn't harass her like that. But the heavy-breathing phone calls came back for a while. Then we all got cell phones, and we haven't given the numbers to anyone except immediate family, or people we can trust implicitly, not to relay them to him. Which brings me to the present, and the reason I decided to sit down and write this out. I've just moved back to my hometown, fresh out of grad school and newly married. Things had been quiet for a long time. Rick was the furthest thing from my mind. My husband and I stopped by Walmart a couple of days back. We'd split up, and I was near the money center just coming out of the restroom. My brain was focused on working my phone, trying to call my husband so I could find him in the supermarket labyrinth. When I felt a tap on my shoulder, distracted, I turned around and almost dropped my phone when I realized I was standing face to face with that son of a bitch. Rick grinned at me and said, "Hello." I'm ashamed to say I couldn't squeeze out anything to respond. He snuck up on me and I was so startled, freaked out, that I couldn't say a word. Then he leaned in, his hands in his pockets, and that damn smile on his face. The one he used to wear when he'd follow my sister and me. And he goes, "You look just like your mom. If I was your dad, though, you look more like me." I was frozen as he grinned at me for about another few seconds, although it felt longer, before I turned on my heel and walked away. As calmly as I could, I put my phone to my ear and called my husband. It took everything I had not to burst into tears right there in the middle of the store. My husband knows the stories, and he was ready to beat the crap out of Rick for saying anything to me. But I ushered him out to our car. We went home without buying anything that day. I told my parents, and they're angry too. It seems like no matter how much time passes, Rick's still hanging out like a boogeyman. That's what it feels like anyway. It's not over, and I know that. It might not ever be, but it feels good to get this all out. I don't know what to make of his little declaration. What I do know is that I'm so very, very grateful that he isn't my dad. Because I can't imagine what my life would be like then. When I was 18, I worked at a local coffee shop in my hometown. And I often worked there picking up shifts and closing 6 nights a week. I had lots of regulars and lots of randoms, but other than maybe a few awkward orders, I never really had a problem with a customer being inappropriate or out of hand. This night was already really stressful for me, as it was Halloween. Not that it has anything to do with the interaction. And I was a little bummed to be closing while my friends were out and about. But I had plans to go to a house that my friends rented right down the street after work, with some pastries and Red Bull. So I really didn't mind too much. It was about 9:45, and it was all ready to close right at 10. It had been dead since about 8, and all I had to do was a final register count. Everything was clean, and I was reading a book to pass the time, trying not to watch the clock. Our counter, by the way, is like a bar counter, long with the register near the door and closed at the end, and with one far end open for us to go in and out of, right near the door to our back room. A man walked in the front door. He looked about mid-20s. He was black, had on a big hoodie, and was wearing sweatpants that sagged down so I could see the waistbands of 2 different pairs of gym shorts underneath. I'm a young white female, but I have no fear of people, and I'm not racist. So it didn't bat an eyelash when he walked in with one hand in a hoodie pocket, and the other in the pocket of one of the pairs of gym shorts. Men of all races wear clothes like that and carry themselves that way, at least where I live. So with no concern, I greeted him, and asked him how he was, and what he was thinking of ordering. He took his time responding, but wasn't looking at the menu or at our chalkboard with seasonal drink offers. He was looking at the front door. He took about a minute, then turned to me and asked my name. I often had male customers ask this, females too, so I told him, and then asked again what he was looking to order. He began to ask me more questions about me and my job. He asked if I liked it. I responded thinking maybe he wanted a job application, and gave him a very short version of how I felt. It was almost 9:50. I kept checking my phone, thinking I just wanted to make his drink so I could clean up again and meet my friends. He nodded, saying he thought I liked my job, which I thought was strange, but again didn't think about it. I agreed again, then started to ask about the shifts I worked. I figured he had sympathy that it was Halloween, and I gave him a vague answer. He then asked why I didn't work on Thursdays. My heart jumped. I didn't see that one coming from a mile away. I struggled to respond, and he continued, and asked if Sunday mornings were better than Wednesday nights. At this point, I broke into nervous laughter and smiles, asking him if he was looking to work for the coffee shop, and that we needed the help. He stopped smiling at this point, and his hand in the hoodie pocket made an abrupt move to the very inside of a pair of gym shorts, basically so that he would be grabbing himself. He didn't quite reach in all the way, and I felt like I was going to pass out. I asked him to order or leave, as the end of our business day was almost there, that I needed to clean and lock up. At this point, I grabbed my cell phone and kept it in my hand, thinking, how can I dial 911 and not have him begin to molest himself in front of me? Or whatever he planned on doing. I began to sort of lean on the counter and ask me questions. He asked me where I lived, did I have a boyfriend, what were my plans for the night. I was trying hard not to cry, and tried my best to lie through more vague answers, hoping he would go away if I just didn't freak out. I began to move away from the register, still leaning on the counter, hands in his pants, toward the open end of the bar. I began to back as far towards the front door as possible, but that end had no opening. It was so high. I couldn't jump it without considerable effort and climbing over the espresso machine. The only other exit I could think of was our narrow drive-through window. Clutching my phone, I asked him what he wanted. For some reason, he stopped. He stood up and looked towards the front door, then turned to look at the clock behind him. I took the chance to start writing a text message to my friend, and I said, if I'm not at your place in 10 minutes, call the police. He caught me sending the text and asked me who I was texting. I told him my boyfriend, and his face became something that I will never forget. His eyes blazed, and he was still as stone. He calmly told me to throw my cell phone across the floor, specifically telling me to try and throw it to the drive-thru. I had to really toss it, about 9 feet away. After, he began to scream, making his way down the counter. He asked me how I could have a boyfriend when he has been watching me at work for the last 2 months as often as possible, and has never seen a man drop me off or pick me up at work. He pointed to the side of the building that I had parked on, and said he knew I parked my blue Toyota there earlier, and not to lie to him. I asked him to leave, beginning to cry. He began to describe my work shifts to a T, when I came in, when I left, how I smoked across the street on break. He told me that he knew that I only drank the Diet Coke that we sold, and that I always cranked my music up when I started my car. At that point, he pulled a small gun out of the gym shorts. and whipped it around as he said that I was stupid to lie to him, and that he knew it all. He was going between enraged and laughing, as if he couldn't believe that I didn't want to talk to him, or that it was funny that I was scared. I offered him all the money in the register and he laughed again, like hysterically, and then again went still. He said, "I'll never forget this moment. I'm not here for any money, Marina. I'm not here for a job. I think you know what I'm here for." I'm sobbing now, and it made him either frustrated or sympathetic, and he began to say how I just needed to calm down, and that he was just really excited to meet me. He still had one hand down near his dick and began to fondle himself, holding the gun with the other hand about 3 feet away from the opening in the bar. I asked him again to please leave. When he didn't move, I asked him what I did to him and why this was happening. He began to speak, saying that I was really pretty. He was continuing to talk when all of a sudden my friend walked in the door with his friends in tow. There were 5 guys all together, and all in a Metal Man together, so they are a pretty distinct group of guys. The man quickly put the gun in his hoodie pocket, so quickly that only 2 of my friends noticed it. He ran for the door, pushing past my friends, and disappeared into the night. I threw up as soon as he was gone. Then 2 of my friends ran out after him, but didn't gain on him enough. I didn't see where he went to. I quit my job the next day and called the police. There was never any follow-up, and I still wonder about what the fuck did or didn't happen to me that night. I live in a fairly small city, but we have a pretty impressive mall called Destiny USA. It's huge, like 7 stories in some parts. It's the 6th largest mall in the US, or something like that. You're probably wondering why I'm rambling on about this, but it plays a part in the story. Like normal teenagers, me and my best friend at the time went there quite often. One Saturday, my dad dropped us off at around 3:30, and we began walking around. About 2 hours after we got there, these 2 guys make really loud and unnecessarily gross comments to each other about us as we walked by. They made sure we heard too, and were staring at us. We were only 14 at the time, but we'd gotten catcalled quite a few times despite our age. Disgusting, I know, so we didn't really think anything of it at first. Not even 2 minutes later, I looked back for whatever reason, and I realized the 2 guys from before were walking behind us. I'm a little uneasy from this, but not too worried. But I tell my friend anyways, and we decide to keep going and take unexpected turns into stores to make sure they weren't following us. We went into various stores on that floor, and when we came out, they were always lingering nearby a bench, but not actually sitting down. And they always began walking again as soon as we exited the store. At this point, we're panicking as neither of us were large or intimidating girls. I was only 5'2". She stood at a mere 4'9", and neither of us weighed any more than 105 pounds. We speedwalked to the nearest elevator, trying not to let them know that we caught on to them following us. We pushed a random button and ended up getting off on the floor underneath the one we were previously on. We walk around for a while until we see the same guys coming from the opposite direction towards us. My friend alerts me about it, and we go back the way we came from. I took the escalator up to another floor, then run over to a section of the mall that was recently built. After we're a good distance into the new section of the mall, we start peeking over the railing onto the floor below us. It doesn't take long for these two fuckers to show up there, frantically looking around trying to figure out where we were. As I mentioned before, our mall is huge. It's super unlikely to see the same person twice, let alone multiple times in a matter of 15 minutes. I start planning in my head what we're gonna do, but I soon realize that since they were directly underneath us, even if we decided to take off, there's a balcony sort of thing on all the floors that allows you to look both down onto the floors below you and above you onto higher floors, which means they could see us pretty much anywhere we decided to go. It's hard to explain. We try sneaking into a nearby store and out of view of these two creeps, all the while praying they didn't look up to the floor above them. And just then we hear aloud, "There they are, come on, let's go." We look back and one of the guys is pointing at us, and they're both looking at us with this angry expression. They start booking it to one of the escalators that lead to the floor we were currently on. Me and my friend are in full panic mode by now. She's hyperventilating and I feel like I'm gonna throw up. So we start hauling ass, trying to get away from them. We continue running, starting to slow down from exhaustion. But now the two dudes are off the escalator and are now almost directly adjacent from us. My friend tells me to text my dad and tell him that we were ready to leave, and to get his car from the parking lot and bring it up to the front entrance to pick us up. Luckily, my dad usually drops us off, then goes shopping on his own while we're walking around. Therefore, if anything happens, he isn't far away, and we can meet up with him easily. So we're fucking tearing ass around this huge building, scared as fuck, trying to text my dad while these two intimidating dudes are running after us, gaining speed and getting closer by the minute. Luckily, when we get to the entrance of the mall, we see my dad, and the two guys that followed us reluctantly backed off. I'm very thankful for my dad, since the security guards at that mall are basically useless, and no bystanders asked us what we were hiding from. It may not seem too scary, but it was terrifying, given we were only 14. It's been about a year since this happened, but this and a few other scary encounters is what caused me to buy a taser, mace, and a hunting knife. I still don't know how they were able to find us so fast, given how big the mall is. So, creepy guys that follow two kids around the mall for about an hour. Let's not meet.